So for those who don't know me, my name is Ben Laster. I'm the Director of College Placement. I've been at the prep for you guys. 2022 will be my 9th class. So I've been actually somewhere between 7 to 8 years. Prior to that, I was Associate Director of Admissions at Stevens Institute in Hoboken. And then I wanted to hop to the secondary school side, and the prep had an opening, and figured it was a great school, and the rest is history. So that's pretty much me. I direct the entire program, so I'll be in front of everyone quite a bit for about a year and a half to 2 years. So yeah, what we're going to do in this, outside of the presentation, there will be a Q&A at the end. So I'm going to do it in terms of the chat format. So I'll go through the slides, but you will get, ample opportunity to have any questions answered, or if there's anything that, is amiss, you can definitely let me know. Just a couple little housekeeping notes too. I will communicate pretty much everything through the portal. So for families that are on there, we capture the most parents in the portal. We capture all the students in the portal. So just a general note, if you're not in the portal as a parent or as a student, be more active with that. It is pretty much the most central place that, we can communicate. If you've been in, you've probably seen a flurry of emails from me already. And that's pretty much where it's going to be. All right. So as I said, this is the kickoff. I absolutely adore football. And everyone that talks to me, you figured that out pretty quickly. So when I wanted to kind of set the tone for a first event, I was like, okay, well, what really sets the tone? Okay, the kickoff. All right. So this is the first event where we are really all together. There will be other events where we'll be together. I met, through a video series the other day, with the class of 2022. It was the first college placement discussion series. So I sent that in the portal. Traditionally, I'm right in front of them, so I get to say, hey, here I am. This is who we are. This is what's going to happen. So it's a little different, but I've tried to over communicate as much as I can, provide videos and meet students and parents wherever they are. So the goals for tonight, definitely want to set the tone, want to assign roles. So I think a lot of this is understanding, I'm a parent, what should I be doing? I'm a student, what should I be doing? What does my college counselor do? So I think it's important for you guys to understand your expectations of us. That being said, establish a program culture. I use the word culture a lot. Culture is huge. The culture of the program is tied into what you can expect from us. We will detail the timeline. So we're going to talk about really what the fall is going to look like, what the winter will look like. How does that move into the senior year? The junior year, I look at it in a game reference. It's really a lot of preparation. It's a lot of, think of it like calisthenics and a lot of practice. Once you get to senior year, it's the game. So it gets it's more about the application season, the game, all the things that go into that, all right? So pretty much how you prepare throughout junior year, that will dictate a lot of how a student and family senior year will go too, okay? As I said, we're going to emphasize first just these next 2 trimesters, really the fall and winter. We're going to let you know what type of resources that you have at your disposal. What does it mean to send your student to the prep? What resources do they have? Things like that. And then we'll have a junior year focus, because as much as we're going to talk about the program itself, we're also going to talk about what these students can control in the current landscape. What is their job? What should they really be focusing on? All right. I always start this with our mission. And I think it's important because that filters into what you can expect from us. So I'll allow you to read it, but there are some buzzwords in here that I always like to pull out, okay? Fit, happy, supportive, comprehensive, attentive. The way that I enjoy running this program is with a high attention to detail. I don't want our students to miss anything. I don't want our parents to miss anything. I want them to feel taken care of in this process and feel great about the decision they made to send the student to the prep based on the level of advisement they're getting for college. So I'll allow you to read that, but that's really what we're going for. Again, the culture, it's organized, it's going to be detailed, and we're going to focus really on fit. Fit is a word that gets thrown around a lot with families, you know, and with the college process, but truly that's what we're looking for. It's not about sending a student to a place where it might look good on paper, but they're not going to be happy. The happiness and where a place that checks all their boxes, that is by far the most important thing that we're looking for and that we are focused on. And we all share in that endeavor between college counselors, parents, students. Okay. So who does what? Okay. Our job in this program as college counselors is to advise you every step of the way. I look at it as a stream of questions. It's a lot of impasses and a lot of different twists and turns where you kind of look around as a student and say, what do I do? You talk to your college counselor and they have an answer and they advise you well. That's really what we're attempting to do. We guide the students and then we support them. There are times where we're supporting them and it's all happy. There are times when we support them and things maybe aren't as good as they could be. All right. But that's really the role. You know, support can mean a lot of things, but that's really our role. I usually get gasps in the crowd when I talk about this, but for the students that are on this right now, you will own this process. I'm going to say it again. You're going to be the owners. You are the captains of the ship. Okay? Now, you can take comfort. You know who the class was before you. You may know the class before that. Every class does it. They get through it, okay? So a lot of what we will do is make sure that the student owns the process, okay? That trickles down to parents. The best thing that I could tell you is you get to be the support. You get to go on, hopefully, fingers crossed, the visits. You get to support the student in everything that they do, but the student runs the process. The best thing that I could tell a parent is that if they're at home and a student says, well, I don't really know what to do and I'm not really sure about this and I'm having some, go talk to your college counselor. That's it. We all have our areas of expertise, and the way that I look at it is you should be pushing them to us. If a family is having great conversations at home, everybody's on the same page, and we're meeting as college counselors with the student, that's an ideal scenario, okay? So thankfully, we have a great parent population that understands this, all right? It'll be so much sweeter for the student if they own it themselves, and we'll make sure that we kind of draw those lines so the student does what they need to do. So what will we do in detail? We will partner with the student. It's a special role that we have. You know, this is one of the biggest things in a student's life. For you students on here, yeah, it becomes the biggest thing in your life, you know, that you're looking at. It's big, it's ambiguous, and you don't really know what's going to happen. So we work with you. It's kind of like I don't want to say a buddy system, but you know, you never feel like you're just on an island by yourself. We make sure that you're organized and that in what you do, you're balanced. Of course, whether it's in our writing, whether it's in conversations with colleagues on the other side of the desk, our job is to position you effectively, all right? I will hear at times a lot will say, well, you know, they know the student so well. Knowing the student well is one thing. Positioning them the right way is another. I always say that. So really it's about understanding through writing, through different little slivers of advisement, how to position that student. We have a lot of general things in our program, but everything is going to be customized to the student. One process is never like the other, okay? And we'll meet them there. Big thing, we promote accountability, maturity, you know, self-awareness. Students learn a lot about themselves during this process. With accountability, it's just like they come to the prep and we want to develop them as a person. So we'll be the first to say, hey, you didn't hit that deadline. Let's get this done. You know, you didn't do it, but let's get it done. Okay. So there is a line there where we're there to scoop them up, you know, you students there, but we're also there to make sure that they're accountable and that they grow through this process. The other thing is maximizing opportunities and specific strategies. As I said, no process is the same. So the way that we would advise one student for one school might be different than the other. And it's our job to understand where those opportunities are and to either help the student or help them understand what they need to do to best position themselves. Okay? And of course, we advise on every portion of the process. I haven't been in an introductory meeting with anyone on here, but I start every single one the same. So you'll probably hear this later on if you're working with me. And this goes for any other college counselor. We can handle every piece of this process. So if you ask for everything, you'll get everything, but you certainly have to raise your hand. So where are we going in the fall? First, I had told you before, we have what's called the College Placement Discussion Series. This is a string of events that we hold across the timeline. Pre-COVID, they were always in person. You know, I would have the entire class and we would say, okay, here's our introductory session, like I had just recently sent out. Here's who I am. Here's what we're going to do. Here's the program and here's how it's going to go. Okay. We will have these throughout the year on the timeline. The next one we'll go through will be about search. It will be about resources. Then we might go into essay. Then after that, we'll go into spring planning items, summer planning items. We try to be in front of them, you know, in front of you students, you know, just students 5 to 7 times per year in these discussion series outside of our events and individual meetings. So we have our planning kickoff. Okay, we're having that right now. We have converted our entire college visit schedule to virtual. We will usually have in person 100 to 130 schools, colleges across the country that will visit us, and ones where we have traction, popularity, you name it. This year we converted the schedule to virtual. So right now, juniors and seniors can sign up for any one of these college visits. You sign up, you'll see that there'll be a link to the visit, and we've methodically made sure that these are outside of class hours. Right now, it's hard enough for you guys as students to get your bearings on what's going on. So these are all outside of class time, okay? It's a good way to start to build your list. We'll have a financial aid night in the second or third week of October. And we'll have the vice president and a cabinet member from Seton Hall University come and speak. You're probably thinking, wow, you know, we're not even there. We're not even applying. We're not even to that point. Why are we going to something like financial aid? But the calendars move back significantly. Now it's to the point where students can really start to apply for financial aid, merit-based scholarships, and all forms of, you know, assistance by October 1st. So now we open this event up for both juniors and seniors and their parents. A new program. I don't know what it's going to be yet, but I do know that I didn't like that we couldn't have one of our programs, the College Representatives Night in the fall. So I will certainly let you know what that's going to be. I'll make sure that it's relevant, like any program we have. So that's TBD, but I'm going to, you know, let you know. It will be something that leverages college representatives. And then in response to what's been going on, which I'll detail, with the struggle for both juniors and seniors in building their list, I created the Hazard Zet Forward College Connection. So we have over 100 young alumni who are either currently in college or just recently graduated that have agreed to be a resource to the class of 2021 and the class of 2022. So if you're a student on here right now and saying, I really wish that I could visit Providence, but I can't right now, and I really kind of want to gain more information, outside of virtual visits, we'll have a student, we would be able to link you up and you could have a conversation with someone who's there, you know? So this was in response to the difficulty right now for the two classes of juniors and seniors with visitation, okay? And that's something that is, we have each college counselor has access to that, and that can happen very simply at any time, anything to move the class forward. So How are we going to move into the winter? As I said, we'll continue to have discussion series events. When I say events, I use that loosely because I will send usually a video, a breakout video on whatever the session is, along with the notes that I traditionally would send. So it's going to be a little bit different, but I would urge students, every discussion series, watch the video, go through the notes. You know, it's meant to target specific dates on the timeline, all right? Introductory college meetings. Once we get to right before winter break, we assign college counselors. We send out letters or communication electronically that will say, hey, I am Ben Laster, your college counselor, and it'll prompt you to schedule an introductory meeting, okay? So that's important. I'm going to say this now, and I hope that it's remembered. It is ideal for a family to have that first meeting in the winter months, January, February. That is the best possible way to have a good process. It allows for the first meeting. It allows for us to give you advisement, hopefully before visitation. It allows you to still set goals for the winter and spring trimesters. We meet you where you are. So that's how it works. And then it allows you for a second or third meeting if you'd like it. The other thing is it sets the tone early with the student. You start to grow a relationship around the college process. In the student's class for after the winter break, each teacher will go over college essay writing in the curriculum. Now, we have students that go through this and they find their essay. All they need is tweaks and things like that. However, there are students that go through the exercise, they gain an understanding of what the essay is and what it's supposed to mean. And through that exercise, they might come after and say, listen, because I did that, I realized that that's not my topic. This is my topic. Either way, it's a win. What we want is for our students to gain an understanding of the essay, what it means, start to draft, start to think, and that will get them to a finalized product quicker. We will have the college information night and panel in February. That is where we traditionally will have panelists from different universities. They'll talk about how they view different pieces of the process. It kind of takes you behind the curtain to see how they think. So it demystifies the process a little bit. Of course, follow up college meetings after you have your introductory meeting. And then, as I said, the College Connection is still a resource during that time. So introducing search. The first thing that I put up for all students, and I'm going to kind of come out of this for 1 second, is we have challenges, okay? That doesn't mean that we can't get past them. The class of 2020 just got out in time, okay? Most of them knew where they were going. Most of them had a very strong sense of schools on their list, what they could provide. They had an idea of their contenders. The class of 2021, it's difficult. It's like, we have a lot of parents on here. It's equivalent to me saying, go out and your job is by this date to be ready to buy a house, but you can't look at any houses. So it is a little bit difficult for them. That is why we're doing everything virtual. The challenge for the class of 2022 will be the same as 2021, which will be list building. My hope, knock on wood, is that things open up. So hopefully their late winter and maybe their spring and their summer, they're able to do more extensive visitation. It's checkered throughout the country. There are some places where you can do a form of a visit, and there are some where you cannot. So that's going to be a moving target as we go. And if you're asking me right now what I view as the #1 challenge for the class, it will be list building, because list building is a byproduct of more than just virtual tours. It's a feel. So, okay. Second, share it again. Okay. Okay. Everyone can see the slides again? Just making sure. Thumbs up. All right. Good. Good, good. All right. So how do we, hold on, I'm going to go back to Search. Okay. So assuming a big assumption, that students are able to visit places, they still have a lot of virtual resources. I will tell you, the one blessing in disguise is that colleges understand the challenges that the class have. They have invested heavily and ramped up in the best virtual resources that I've seen, not just on the college side, but on the secondary school side. There's a lot out there. And college representatives are a heck of a lot more engaging right now because they understand that they need to bridge the gap while not having students come to their campus. What are you trying to do for students on here and parents supporting? You're trying to define criteria. All of you on here know, whether you're them or the parents, it's hard to get a 16, 17-year-old student to tell you what they want, okay? A lot of what they struggle with is defining a criteria, okay? It's not very difficult for us to help them, like it says at the bottom of the screen, connect the dots. Find universities that suit them. The hard thing for them is to first define the criteria so we can help them connect the dots. So really a lot of what this fall is going to be is soul searching. It's going to be trial and error. It's going to be the student that goes to the large school and feels completely intimidated and then says, well, that was 22,000 students. So I'm not going to make the same mistake twice. I'm not going to do my next visit to schools that are 30 and 40,000. There are a lot of considerations, and this is just a few of them. For some students, their number one criteria is a biomedical engineering program that is more clinical than others. For others, it's gut feeling. For others, it's a campus feel. It's maybe student life. For some, it's being close to an urban area. For some, it's being in the middle of the countryside. Every student is different. So there are all these different criteria. And eventually you put them together where we're sitting and a student says, Mr. Lasser, I know I don't want to go further than 6 hours. I know I want more than 10,000 students. Here's where I am academically. Then, can you give me some suggestions? Okay, these are good for that admissibility category. These are good for that. These are good for that. That's how we help. We help connect the dots. Okay, it's pretty simple. So really that's what search is all about. It's about the student defining what they want and then connecting the dots. So how do you do search in the current universe that we're in? You might be able to visit some campuses. We have, as I said, all the programming, virtual sessions. Every single university in the country is going to have robust virtual resources right now. If campuses open up, the most basic events that a student can do is a tour and an information session. That is the general guideline. I put underneath that general versus specific events. If a student is largely undecided, I wouldn't start with a very specific event. I would go to something more general. Allow yourself down the road to say, now I know that this said school is a contender, so now I really want to go to an event that's just for computer science students. So start very general, and then you can go specific. The topic of demonstrated interest is and has been a hot topic for years in the admissions landscape. What it means is that colleges are using different forms of interest to decide in their process whether to admit a student or not. So I'll give you some examples. Demonstrated interest, you interview, you visit campus. There are some colleges that will say, well, we have 2 applicants here. One of them has visited campus 3 times. The other has not clicked on any of our emails, has not visited, has not interviewed. They're equivalent. Who do we feel like we have a better chance of yielding? And yielding meaning who's going to end up coming to our school. So they'll use that type of data. Is that every college? No. There are some schools where they do not track it at all. They are unbiased. So they don't care if you scream from the rooftops, I'll do anything to go there, where there are other schools that will look closely. What they're doing with this is they're trying to predict yield. So they're trying to say, out of every 10 students, how many are we going to get to sign on the dotted line? And they're going to say, okay, let's look at this demonstrated interest and let's see where they're at. There are some schools that live by it. There are some that don't at all, okay? However, majority of the schools in the country do track it. If I had to say there's a category of schools that don't track it, it's traditionally the most competitive schools in the country. Because if you think about it, for every 10 students accepted to Harvard, they're probably going to get 8.5 to 9 to sign up. They don't need to worry about who's interested or not. They know their metric. Where another school where I was previously, Stevens, we only thought we could get 2.5 to 3.5 students to sign on. We had to look a little bit closer and be strategic. You know, we didn't have the sheer numbers, maybe not the popularity of some of the other schools, okay? We'll talk with students a lot, especially going into senior year, about admissions contact. What's good contact? What's bad contact? Self-advocacy. We will tell students how to email colleges. When is it good to provide an update? When is it good to reach out to an admissions person? Who is that person? So that's another form of demonstrated interest that schools will track, okay? So I put in quotations the preliminary list, okay? The reason I put preliminary is there's a big difference between preliminary and refined. A refined list is one that you have gone through, you've worked with your college counselor, they have told you that there is balance. If you look at the front page of our website, I don't put this up there lightly. Last year, the average student at the prep was admitted to anywhere between 5.5 and 6 colleges. That's not just a dart. That's a byproduct of the approach that we take with how many schools we tell you to put in one category of admissibility and another, okay? So balance is the key. As parents and students, you're working together, and all you're doing is utilizing these months to prepare for that first meeting. So it's kind of like, okay, we did some stuff and we kind of looked around and this is what we have, you know, sculpted. We've done some work, okay? You don't have to have the perfect list. You know, it's not about that. But a good, solid preliminary list of ideas. When I give a student a preliminary list, there's traditionally anywhere between 25 and 40 schools on there. Now, that may sound like a lot, but there's 3,000 plus in the country. We cut it down pretty quick, okay? Think balance and follow our approach. Students never have poor processes when they follow our approach. When they go off on their own, that's when we traditionally will tell them in advance, hey, if you go with what you have here, this is what we see happening, okay? And that's not what we would want to happen, okay? All right. So I want to go over Naviance. For parents and students on here, for the first time, you might have heard Naviance. I would agree with you. It's not utilized much in freshman and sophomore year. Junior year really is when you start to really get into it. You're signing up for college visits and things like that. So what is it? It's an educational platform, okay? And what it does is it allows you to do searches on it. So it's a search filter. The other thing that's most important about it is it tracks our success with certain colleges, all right? In my last discussion series that I sent to the juniors, I believe I talked about about apples to oranges comparisons, about how really colleges are only looking at you in the context of Seton Hall Prep. They do not look at you against other schools. They literally are looking at you only in that context. So what Naviance does is it provides some general benchmarkers of success with certain schools. It's a communication frame. So if a student puts colleges in their colleges that they're thinking about, instantly, if there's a college visit, an email will shoot to the student. So it's intuitive. The most important thing that it does for seniors eventually, and when you guys get to that point, is it's for submission of materials, tracking materials, and literally the entire process of how your file gets there outside of your application and test scores. So Naviance is huge for that. Okay. The best usage of Naviance. As I said, the data in there is prep sensitive. So it'll tell you, you know, this is this is where we're starting to have success with a certain school. But it's very, very general in nature. It's a benchmark. It's not the law. It's not gospel. What I tell students and families to interpret it realistically. There's a tale of two eyes. A student is a 3.7 at the prep. They look at a scatter plot where they see that a school that they're looking at has only admitted one student underneath 4.2 over the past 4 years. And they say, well, there's that guy, so we're good. That's the wrong way to interpret it. The right way to interpret it is, generally speaking, are they in an area where the majority are admitted? Are they in an area where it's 50-50? Are they in an area where they're well above? So I always say with Naviance, interpret it realistically, okay? We will always have the most specific data for colleges. So we can transcend Naviance at any time. There's not a college that a student could come into me where I couldn't say, and that goes with other college counselors as well on staff, where we couldn't say, here's where success starts to happen. Here is where you are, okay? So we will always, we're dealing with this year. I put this, we do it every year. So leverage us. We'll get down to the nitty gritty where these were the 3 kids from last year. Here's where they were. They're like you, so we can get, really detailed with it. So always leverage us. This portion is for the students on here. For those of you who haven't been around me, if you talk to the seniors, they will tell you, I say a lot, control the controllables. Don't listen to noise. Focus on what you can control in this process. There's a lot of noise out there. College is an exciting topic, and there's a lot out there. But if you focus on the things in front of you, that will spiral out into positives for you, okay? The most important thing for a junior to focus on, and for parents that are supporting, is college should be a positive motivator. It shouldn't be anxiety provoking, all right? Your transcript will be anywhere between 50 and 75% of every decision in admissions. It is by far the most important. So right now you're embarking on your junior year, okay? Trends are important. If you've been consistent, stay consistent. If you've been on an upward trend, try to continue that upward trend. I put at the bottom here, everything can matter in the process. It can get very detailed. You never know where you are. So a lot of students in junior year, when I have meetings with them, I'll say, if you continue to do what you're doing, and then in senior year, you do this, that's when you start to get to a position where you might get a positive. So students can always help themselves. Freshman year matters. Sophomore year matters. Junior year matters. Senior year could matter. So literally every student is different, but it's important to set goals for yourself. As I said, transcript is number one. It is always the biggest piece of any admissions decision, and it is the first thing that you look at in admissions, okay? Standardized testing. Speaking of challenges, it is mostly taking care of itself for the class of 2021, but still it's an issue. The majority of the schools in the country have gone test optional because students haven't been able to test. It's been very difficult, okay? I don't know how far this will go in terms of SAT and ACT cancellations, but we will work with it. We'll work through it. We'll do it as a class. I will always advise you based on where we are at. Right now, you need to act as if. Testing for most schools is still going to be a considerable piece of the process. There are a lot of schools that are going test optional just for 2021, and they will be ready to pounce back on requiring testing as soon as they know that students are all on an even playing field and they can test again, all right? You will take the PSAT again this year. The SAT versus the ACT. Where do I focus? As you get into the winter and the spring months, we always advise that a student will take both, okay? You need a benchmark. You need numbers, okay? That's a reason why in March, we hold the ACT every year, and we always hold the SAT at the prep, because we know that that's going to be traditionally your jump-off point, somewhere around, December, January, February, March. That's when you're going to start. Then Coinciding with your introductory meeting, we'll have a testing conversation. What's your plan? When should your plan start? When should it end? Which should you favor and why? How does your testing correlate to where you are academically, transcript-wise? Okay? We will talk more about the timeline. We may or may not talk about SA2 subject tests, and we will certainly talk about what it means to be test optional. We're gonna have a lot of different things. Testing can still be a strength for a test optional school, or it may be great that you don't have to submit it based on where you are. I realize that I'm going lightly on testing. That's not something right now that you will focus on, but you will as you start to get into the winter and the spring, you will start to focus on it. Okay. Another focus for juniors, involvement. I want to be clear, involvement will never be as important as testing and grades. It's just not. It's a piece of it, but it's certainly not as big as those pieces. How does it factor in? That's the part of the process that's subjective. How involved are they? What have they done? How long have they had in duration with what they've done? What special things have they done? Then it goes down to essays, supplemental essays, interviews. It's all these subjective pieces, okay? My best advice for juniors is number 2 on this. Do what you love, okay? Entrench yourselves in a few areas. It is not about being Mr. Everything and being totally stressed out. It's not about that. Entrench yourselves in multiple things. If you haven't really gotten that involved to this point, focus on getting involved this year. Focus on utilizing your summer. The summer of junior year is a time where students do amazing things. Internships, service and mission trips, classes, you name it. So really, when it comes down to it, really focus on your involvement. In the end, you're like your peers right now. You're going to be staring at an application, and you're going to hear someone like me say, let's talk about all the dimensions that make you who you are. Let's talk about that. What do you have? What have you done? I've done this, and I've done that, and I've done it. Okay, cool. So it's never too late to create dimensions to who you are and another piece to the puzzle. We have a lot of ways to get involved at the prep. It may not be the same, but I know that Mr. During is going to provide a lot of opportunities for you to still be involved, albeit in a different fashion. Okay? All right? I'm going to stop sharing for a second. I wanted to take about 40 to, somewhere around 40 minutes on this. And the main reason is I want to have as much time for questions as possible. So what I would ask is feel free to ask me any questions. Just put them in the Zoom chat. They could be just to me. They could just to be everyone. And, fire when ready. I hope that that's very straightforward, concise. I hope for the students, you get a sense of the timeline to come, what you can control and how you could help yourself this year. For parents, how this will all work, what your role will be, and what you'll be seeing them go through and what you'll be going through with them together over the next 2 years, pretty much. So, okay, question came in. Will there be a calendar of upcoming events? All my events are always listed on the SHP calendar that you can view in the portal. The college visits are the only events that are not on there because there's over 100. Mrs. Scaramella would kill me. But those are listed in Naviance, okay? That's a good question, good segue. Do parents have access to Naviance? Here is my best advisement. The parent accounts are pretty weak. They're not the same interface as students. So when parents get active in them, it kind of takes them away in a way. Down the road, it's a little bit of a hiccup. So I would tell you the best situation is for parents to access their student's account. They could see all the Naviance visits, and down the road, they'll be able to get a sense of things when we start to track materials, and they could start to view what their students have done, okay? So, all right, good question. Who does the student contact to get their Naviance login? Myself, Mr. Filato, or their school counselor. Anyone could get them their login. I would say right now you could focus on school counselor if you've been active with them, but of course, Mr. Filato and myself could also get that for them, okay? When should we plan to take the SAT or ACT if we took Algebra 2 last year, okay? The schedule is very similar, all right? Most students are going to take the SAT and the ACT for the first time somewhere around February, March, or April of the junior year. If you're doing it before December, I'd say that's fine, but you're early. If you're doing it as a way to get a benchmark, that's totally fine. Okay. Good question too about, of course, with Algebra 2, you know, for most students, you know, a lot of the SAT and some of the ACT is going to have Algebra 2. Some is going to be inclusive of pre-calc. So yeah, so totally up to you. Is there a preference on virtual visits via SHP assistance versus setting and schedule individually? Yeah, I would say so. It's kind of like it's our visit that they schedule with us. So it's centered around SHP. However, if a student misses it, your tracking for demonstrated interest will be the same, whether you come to ours or whether you go to one of theirs. So the long story short is feel free to do any of them. So I've told multiple students, if you can't make it, that's okay. Don't stress. You could still go to any school's website and do a virtual visit. How much should the student focus on test prep classes? Whew, that's a loaded question. All right, a good question, but a loaded one. Right now, you have to act as if testing will happen. So I would say your focus should be more so in the winter and into the spring months, once you start to get a benchmark first from where the student is testing as a baseline. So if a student has an SAT as a baseline and an ACT as a baseline, I think that that's more efficient in figuring out first what direction you want to go, and then you could do preparation. So I would say light touch when it comes to preparation prior to understanding which direction a student is going to point. There's a PSAT prep course coming up this fall. Is the test prep course important at this point, or more important as we move toward the end of junior year? You said it. As you move towards, I would say, the end of the second and into the third trimester, that's when I would say it's more important, because you'd be working hard, but you'd also be working smart, because you'd allow the student to be able to get a benchmark. Okay. Have the students been assigned their college counselor? No. As I said in the slide, that happens in the winter, right basically when we go to holiday break, and then right after holiday break is when meetings start to get scheduled. Is visiting virtually, visually makes an impact for, so I think the question is being there on campus, is that more of an impact than virtual? Not how it's, categorized right now. In the future, if campuses open up, I think you always get a nod when you've done an actual visit on campus as opposed to something virtual. So down the road, yes. If the question is visiting, yeah, so I think that's good. If I did not get that question, feel free to send a follow-up and I'll get it right. In the absence of SAT and ACC scores due to COVID cancellations, what do we expect colleges to use as a basis for admissions in the absence of scores? It's just like any test optional school. What they do is they place more importance on your transcript because they feel that's the best predictor of your success and everything else. So there's over 1,000 schools in the country that are test optional and were test optional before COVID. So they know what they're doing. So yeah, that's not, the basis will be everything else. What are the main differences between the SAT and ACT? Whew, that's a loaded question. There's a lot. 2 sections versus 4 sections. The ACT having a science section, the SAT only having evidence-based reading and math, the structure of the questions, the timing, huge differences, huge differences. Good question. What did you mean by SAT subject test? There are hour-long subject tests that are sponsored by the College Board. They are traditionally only required by some of the most competitive schools in the country. They are, as I said, hour-long subject tests. So there is one in biology, there is one in history, there is one in math 1 and math 2, inclusive of different math. So what they are is they're for you to show your aptitude in certain areas. Those have kind of fell to the wayside this year because they're usually only requested and required by the most competitive schools, and the highly selective schools in this country, that are admitting, 30 to 50% of their students, they're usually recommended, not required. Okay. What information is submitted to a school through Naviance outside of transcript and test scores? So right there, that's actually incorrect. So there are no test scores submitted through Naviance. Test scores are submitted by the student through the ACT or through the College Board. What is sent through Naviance is our school profile, your counselor recommendation, your transcript, your first trimester if you want to, and as many teacher recs as you have, traditionally 2 of them. Okay. Can students request a particular counselor? We do, pretty much random, but if a student does feel passionate about a certain counselor that they want to work with, as long as it's before the winter, we will honor it. So we try to, as little as possible, just do this as random. I mean, I have over 80 students and the overwhelming majority are random. I'm fine with that. So literally when it comes down to it, the short answer is yes, but totally up to each their own, to each student. Okay. How do you determine which test is best, ACT versus SAT? If I had a 3-prong approach to it, number 1 is going to be the actual score. So you're going to look at the concordance between the scores. So let's say you have a student that has an SAT of a 1200 and they have an ACT of a 30. A 30 is equivalent to a 1400. So if I were sitting with a student, I'd say you're trending 200 points ahead. It's a pretty simple decision here. Now, if they're close, we could also talk about other things. How did the student feel about the test? Where do they feel that they're going to have the highest ceiling when it all comes down to it? Those are 2 pieces of it. And the other thing is, of course, part of the comfort, but the structure of it. So did they enjoy the structure of the test? Did they, how did it jive with them? All right. Should the student meet with you earlier if they're being recruited now as a junior? Not really, unless you need a transcript or if you are at a situation where you are being actively recruited and very close to a commitment situation, then it is perfectly okay. We do not want you to misstep, and we understand that commitments at times will happen in the first trimester before we get to a student. So yeah, it's not really necessary. I will say this too, because we are a wonderful sports school. Outside of recruitment, the process for a student athlete is exactly the same. There's no difference. The only difference is in the end, that student may only go through the process applying to one school as opposed to 7 to 9. So I get that question all the time. Well, my guy's an athlete, so that's totally different. Listen, I'm a sports fan, so I'm not knocking it, but no, process will be exactly the same. Now, in terms of recruitment and things like that, that's a whole nother meeting prior, So, sorry, to be long-winded, we can certainly assist, but unless it's an imminent commitment and hot and heavy and, that's usually a student's perfectly fine. They can wait a little bit. They could field interest. They'll feel the love and enjoy it. Okay. I went over that. At what point should a student start to focus on one test? Traditionally, it's in the spring. That's when they make that determination. Can you provide some additional information about the essay writing program? Is it part of the SHP curriculum? Yes, it is part of the curriculum. I do a session for the students on the college essay. Then after the essay, they will have it introduced by each English faculty member that's teaching juniors. I have instructed annually the English faculty so they know what we're going through and what they're up against. I allow them the autonomy of how they do it. So we do have some teachers that are English teachers that will say, I only want you to choose one prompt and do it. There are others that will say, no, I want you to do 2 or 3. So I do allow them that autonomy when it comes to, what they're going to do. Okay. And traditionally, like it's going to happen in the winter and the spring months. Yeah, and it is part of the curriculum. Does SHP have specific SAT, ACT test prep at the school? Yes, we do. John Henriksen, he runs Monmouth County Test Prep. He's also a teacher of biology, environmental science, and some others. He runs basically our test prep internally, but I will tell you, test prep is everywhere. It's a billion-dollar industry. So there are test prep centers everywhere, and that doesn't even include private tutors. So, okay. Other questions? All right, so, okay, good. Will a student write one essay for admission to all schools? Yes, eventually there will be one college essay that goes to your schools. However, what happens is colleges, say college A will say, we need your college essay, but we also have 2 little itty bitty questions that we want you to write out. Those are called supplemental essays. So a lot of colleges will have what are called supplemental essays, which is additional writing outside of your college essay. But easy answer, yes. You will refine, revise, finalize one essay that will go to every school, every college. Okay. Okay. I wanted it to be about, okay. When does the SHP SAT prep class start? Good question. I don't know the answer to it. School counselors, they deal with a lot of test prep. So you can ask your school counselor, or if it's internally, Mr. Henriksen. Okay. Do you help students get into colleges outside of the US, and what's your view on international colleges? 100%. Have done it year in and year out. We have students go international every year. My view on it is it's wonderful for certain students. Just depends on the student and what they want. But we send students every single year to, I would say we mostly Canada and Western Europe, but yeah. So yeah, not uncommon at all. Okay. Does SHP have better relationships with some colleges over others? I mean, it's my job to have relationships with a ton of colleges. Do I have better relationships with some? Yeah, I would say, but that's only because we work with them a lot. So obviously, if I have conversations with schools annually where we have, 5 or more applicants, that's a little different than maybe a school where we might only have one applicant every 3 years. That doesn't mean that we don't have a solid relationship, but we're talking a little bit more. So, yeah. But my goal is to have great relationships with every school that our students apply to. So, yeah, we do well with that. So, PSAT testing, you mentioned it. Will it be you mentioned it will be taken again. When is that date and how important at this time? I don't know the date, to be honest. School counseling will know. It usually is in October. It's the second run. I think it's on the SHP calendar. How important is it? It's a pretest. So not really. It's important for them to get a benchmark of where they might fall or how they're trending with the SAT. But is it relevant for the ACT? No. Is it relevant for the SAT? It could be. How does the college panel work that I mentioned? That's a secret. No, I'm kidding. It's we get a bunch of different panelists across the country at schools of different admissibility, different types of schools, and it's an interactive panel. So you get to fire when ready and, ask them a lot of questions. So.